Good morning, Year 10. We're back with another lesson that is following on from what we were speaking about last lesson with the menstrual cycle, and this also links back in with what we were talking about a few weeks ago with different contraceptive methods. So this lesson's all about hormones and fertility, and as you can see, it's for higher tier combined only. So today what you're going to be doing is we're going to be explaining the use of hormones in modern reproductive technologies to treat infertility, and as part of that we're going to be describing what IVF is, which you might have heard of before, you might not know what it is, and today we're going to be talking about how it works. And then extra challenge, which you can have a go at answering at the end. Women over a certain age or with a high BMI are not allowed IVF on the NHS, nor are women whose partner has already had a child. Do you agree or disagree with these conditions? So a bit of a kind of philosophical debate, and that's going to link back with what you spoke about in Year 9 when you did stem cells. And there's another biology topic that talks about those sorts of things too that I cannot remember off the top of my head for now. But that kind of brings in those ethical discussions that we have about certain things to do with biology. It links back in with the testing on animals stuff that we were talking about when we did diseases and medications and things. So, can you pause the video and have a look at this? So this is Louise Joy Brown. She was born on the 25th of July in 1978, and why is she famous? So feel free to Google it, feel free to have a think, and come back when you're ready. So she was the first ever human to be born through IVF. And so here is a newspaper article from around the time. So she was born after conception by in vitro fertilization, and that's what IVF stands for, in vitro fertilization. So here are our keywords. Let's talk about fertility. So firstly, can I get you to have a look at the card sort, which normally we would be sorting out by hand, but I've kind of compiled them together onto the PowerPoint. So over on the left here we have a whole bunch of reasons for infertility, and over on the right we have a whole bunch of solutions for those reasons. So I'm going to go through the reasons really quickly just so that you know what all of these mean. So not enough FSH produced. Remember, FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. That's that hormone that causes eggs to mature in the ovaries. The inability to carry a fetus to term, so that is somebody who has been pregnant but they keep on having miscarriages before the baby gets old enough to be born, and so a miscarriage is where the baby dies while the pregnancy is going on. Then we've got the inability to fall pregnant naturally, which I think is fairly self-explanatory, but it means that people are trying for a child but they're finding that they're not falling pregnant. We have the problem ovaries stop producing eggs early. So I think we spoke a little bit about the idea that women have a certain number of eggs, and that's the number that they have for the rest of their lives, and when they get to between the ages of about 40 and 55, they run out of eggs and then they start to go through menopause. But if the ovaries stop producing eggs early, then that means that when the woman is in like her 20s or her 30s, this starts happening. Next one is a blockage in the oviducts, and the oviducts are the fallopian tubes. Remember, that's the tube that leads from the ovaries to the uterus. And then we have low sperm counts, so if the male isn't producing that much sperm. So can I get you to pause the video and try to connect these reasons for infertility up with possible solutions for me and write those down in your book. Okay, so here are our answers. Not enough FSH produced, and the solution for that would be injections of FSH. Inability to carry a fetus to term could be something like putting the fertilized egg into a surrogate, and so a surrogate is another female who carries the baby. So she gets pregnant and then delivers the baby. Then we have the inability to fall pregnant naturally, and the treatment for that is usually IVF. And this is a way of fertilizing eggs, basically out of the uterus, out of the body. Then we have ovaries stop producing eggs early, and a solution for that could be egg donation. So somebody can fall pregnant, but it's not using their own egg, they use a donor egg from another person because they don't have enough eggs to be used. Blockage in the oviducts. This could be done with fixed with artificial insemination. So again, that can be IVF, or it could be a few other things. And then again, low sperm count can be treated with artificial insemination, which could again be IVF. And artificial insemination. So insemination is where the sperm meets the egg and it fertilizes it. So it's artificially doing that. Okay, so artificial control of fertility. Here are a couple of our fertility treatments. So first of all, FSH can be used to treat infertility. Some females lack enough of the hormone in order to mature the eggs. So we use FSH because it means that it encourages the eggs to mature. Yeah? And then also a small amount of luteinizing hormone is going to be used, and so that way that egg can be released. So have a think about what could happen if you get the dose wrong. I'd be really interested to hear some of your answers to that. I'm not going to go through them, but feel free to email them to me or put them into the file. So here's one of our kind of answers. In 1971, an Italian doctor removed 15 fetuses from a female that had undergone fertility treatment. 15, and obviously none of them survived, right? So if you stimulate too many eggs, then you might have too many babies being produced. Okay, then we have in vitro fertilization. So, in vitro fertilization, or IVF, is fertilization in the laboratory outside the mother's body. So, in vitro means in glass, so outside the body. And so here is kind of a demonstration of that happening. Here we have an egg and it's being fertilized. This is a baby that could be produced from them. And you might have heard people who are produced through in vitro fertilization, IVF, being called test tube babies. So here is a baby in a test tube. So I'm going to put up on the PowerPoint slide a whole bunch of statements, and I would like you to pause the video and try to put them in order for me of what the different steps are. So there you go, pause the video, you can have about 5 minutes and then we will go through them. Okay, so here are our steps. Actually, I'm going to go through the dot points. So the first step is a female chooses to have the treatment, so that's F, and uses either her partner's sperm or a donor sperm. Yeah, she is then given follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone to stimulate the maturation of many eggs. So we want as many eggs as possible being released from the body. Then, after an ultrasound, a doctor uses the needle to collect the eggs from the female's ovary. Then the eggs are combined with sperm outside the body, and this process is called fertilization, and this sperm either comes from, like we said over here, either from the female's partner or from a sperm donor. If maybe there isn't a partner, or maybe the partner's sperm can't be used to produce a baby for whatever reason, then the next stage is going to be B. Any successfully fertilized eggs become an embryo and 1 or 2 are implanted back into the uterus lining. This number is really important. We'll talk about it in a little bit later. And then last step is D. This develops into a fetus and grows in the uterus for the next 9 months. So what happens during IVF? For IVF, the woman is given hormones to encourage her to release eggs. This can result in multiple pregnancies. The eggs are harvested or collected, and then the man provides a sperm sample, and the sperm sample is used to fertilize the eggs in a petri dish. And again, this is another picture of that happening. So, what happens when the egg is fertilized? The fertilized eggs are left to develop into embryos, and this little image here is showing that one egg starting to divide into multiple little cells, which is the first stage of development of a fetus. When they are at an 8-cell stage, so 8 of these little cells have been produced, viable embryos are then implanted back into the woman's uterus. So viable just means alive and still healthy and still growing. And then spare embryos can be frozen for future attempts or donated to other couples. Sometimes they're destroyed. It's very common to freeze them for future attempts because most people want to have more than one child, not everybody, but some people do. And so they freeze the eggs to give them that option a few years down the line. So, IVF today. IVF is now quite common, although there are quite low success rates, so only 1 in 4 tries end in success, so that's only 25%. So therefore, many couples have to undergo several rounds of treatment if they want to fall pregnant. These days, it's common for several eggs to be fertilized at once, and more than one is going to be implanted. So, why do you think that more than one embryo is implanted into the uterus? See if you can come up with an answer for me and write it down. So then here's the start of our yellow question. So here is our first assess task for the day. Can you please write up the method used for IVF for a young trainee doctor to follow? Demonstrate good literacy skills and the use of scientific keywords. And I would love you to impress me by explaining or defining the keywords that you've used. Here are some important keywords that you might want to use. I think this task will take you about 10 to 15 minutes if you do it properly. So pause the video, have a go. Then can I get you to answer these 2 questions for me? So you can research them, you can have a think about them and write the answers down, I don't mind, but identify some advantages of using IVF and identify any disadvantages of using IVF. Pause the video and I'm going to go through the answers in just a second. Okay, so here are some advantages. It helps couples with fertility problems who want to have a baby. It means that there won't be as much surgery on women with problems conceiving. So maybe whereas they had like a blockage in their fallopian tube, it means that we don't have to open them up and do invasive surgery. It can save a woman's eggs in case of an accident. So I'll talk you through that a little bit. Maybe there could be an issue where like her uterus becomes damaged but her eggs are still okay, and so those eggs can be used to grow a baby and then maybe be put into a surrogate or something so she can still have children. Lots of people who undergo cancer treatment, that can really affect your fertility, and so lots of people might freeze eggs or take sperm samples before they undergo the cancer treatment, and that way in the future they can undergo IVF to have children. And then a possible advantage is you could get multiple births. So maybe people only want to be pregnant once and they could have twins or something like that, or possibly triplets, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Then some disadvantages of this form of fertility treatment include the success rates are not high. So remember, it's only about 25%. It's quite emotionally and physically stressful. So in order for the woman to stimulate egg production, she needs to have lots of injections of these hormones every single day, which can be quite stressful, especially if you don't like needles. You need to go to the doctors constantly about it and see specialists. You don't know if it's going to work, and so you might have eggs being implanted and then they have to deal with the fact that she doesn't fall pregnant, which can be very difficult for a lot of people. So lots of emotional and physical stress can be put on female and a male partner in the situation. It's very expensive, so either they have to pay for that themselves or it's a high cost to the NHS. There could be multiple births. We'll talk about the risks in a second, but this can increase the risks to both the mother and baby. So multiple births is like twins or triplets or even more babies. And it could be considered ethically wrong. So this is kind of going back to the stem cells argument from last year, but basically because not all of the embryos get used and they might get destroyed, that brings up the argument again of, are you destroying a human life, etc. Yeah. And then there are possibly also a few other groups that have issues in terms of, well, if you can't fall pregnant naturally, should you be allowed to fall pregnant this way? And there are certain people who have issues with that. So I'm going to put some information on the next slide and you can flick back and forth between these 2 sections of the video. But what I would like you to do is read through the information on the slides and then answer these questions for me. So what information do each of these cards tell you? And following on from that, what advice would you give a couple who is considering IVF? So basically, how many embryos should they have implanted? 1, 2, 3, more. And basically I'd like you to write an answer down and be prepared to upload it to tell me. So here are the information cards. Have a little look. And last activity for the day is our extra challenge. So women over a certain age or with a high BMI are not allowed IVF on the NHS, nor are women whose partner has already had a child. Do you agree or disagree with these conditions? So take 5 to 10 minutes if you like and write out an answer for this. And other than that, that is the end of the lesson year 10. So I hope that you learned a little bit about IVF. You need to be able to talk about the general method. You need to be able to analyze a lot of the pros and cons. You need to be able to talk about some possible different fertility treatments. Now, if you have any questions, please email me. And other than that, I hope you are all staying safe.